Well, hello everyone. Welcome to this session of question and answers. I'm Tom Dozier. I'm the president of Misophonia Institute, and I've been studying and working on misophonia for the last 12 years. So let me now we've got an intro screen going here. Stop sharing that and just talk so I can see pictures of everyone. So I'm here to have a question and answer session. So if you have a question or a comment, raise your hand, raise your physical hand, just unmute yourself and speak up in the pause. Anything there is fine. We're happy to discuss any aspects of misophonia. So anybody have a question to start with? If not, I've got a little something I'll show.
I have a comment.
Okay, Jolene.
So last weekend, I logged into your Q A, and people were very actively engaged. I wonder if it would be useful. I find it useful to remind people that it's better to refer to general. I don't know how you feel about this, but this is how I feel. It's generally better to refer to trigger things in a more general way than rather than make a long list of this, that, and the other thing that one person is having trouble with, because people with misophonia have a kind of a tendency to listen to those long lists and go, oh, I hadn't thought of that one. And then maybe they start getting upset by that. So I would suggest, if it's okay with you, that be a recommendation. Refer to triggers generally, but don't make a long specific list.
Right. Well, I will say, Jolene, if we're dealing with a specific problem, then mentioning a specific trigger can have some value. But
yes, okay.
What you're saying is absolutely true. On Misophonia Treatment and Management Facebook group, I've just started deleting any message where they mention a trigger without putting trigger alert up at the start of the message, so that people don't have exactly the problem you're referring to. So you're absolutely right. And we understand how these triggers, why this develops. It's part of the misophonia is a learned or acquired reflex condition. And once we start focusing on something, we start reacting to it. One person that I worked with developed misophonia as a child, and her mother probably had misophonia and complained about the sounds her father made. And the daughter goes, "What sounds?" And the mom goes, "Those sounds, this," and points them out. And then she developed misophonia to those sounds. So we have good evidence that misophonia is a learned response condition. So I will also say that you can type in a question in the chat box, but I will not be reading the chat box. If I'm talking, I'm not reading the chat box, okay? If I'm interacting listening to a specific person, I'm not reading the chat. So if somebody types a message in the chat, please speak up. Somebody speak up and say, hey, there was a message by so-and-so, and I'll probably say, okay, read me the message. But anyway, we don't currently have a question yet. I'm going to give you a count to 5. Either speak up or I'll go to talk about misophonia. Lyle, unmute and let's hear from you.
Just to elaborate kind of on what you just said, about everybody I've talked to with misophonia, and I won't mention any triggers, although that doesn't bother me for what it's worth. Just about everybody I talked to where their misophonia developed in childhood, and myself included in that, kind of had this story about being yelled at the dinner table. So they're kind of associating the negative feeling of being yelled at for whatever negative behavior was being pointed out in the sounds at the dinner table. And that just kind of, so when you hear this, you're going to have that feeling.
Yeah.
That's
Thank you.
kind of a support to what you're saying. It's not research, but it's kind of just my personal observation.
And good anecdotal evidence. I do know one man who remembers the night he developed misophonia. He had anxiety. He was having difficulty going to sleep. He was sharing a room with his brother, and his brother had allergies, and so he could hear his brother breathing. And he lay there for, he said, not too long, maybe 30 minutes, went to the couch, went to sleep, no problem. He said, but after that one night, every time I heard my brother breathe for the next 50 years, or probably wasn't 50, probably 30 years, it triggered me. So it's the age of onset of misophonia. Let me share this graph. This is from a research study that we conducted probably starting back in about 2015. We had about 1,000, a little over 1,000 people respond to the survey. And one of the questions was, when did your misophonia begin? And so this is retrospective, looking back. It has the flaws of any self-report retrospective data. But we have this kind of nice childhood curve here, right? Late childhood, early teens for onset. But notice we also had people whose misophonia began out into their 20s and 30s and 40s. So misophonia is an acquired reflex condition that can develop at any age. I worked with one man who, in his mid to late 20s, I don't remember exactly where he was when it started. He was living in an apartment, second level apartment, and he had a pair of mockingbirds build a nest outside of his window. Now that sounds cute to have baby birds outside your window, right? The only problem is that the male mockingbird chirps 24 hours a day at certain times of the year. So he's laying there trying to go to sleep, and those damn mockingbirds won't shut up. And so when he started hearing, it was very sound specific. Mockingbirds have a number of different chirps, but apparently they're learned chirps, because when we went out on the internet, there's only one variety of mockingbirds in the United States. But the ones that were on the internet, nah, that doesn't trigger me, nah, that doesn't trigger me. And so it was the local mockingbird chirp that triggered him at first, and then it spread to other mockingbird sounds, to other birds, and it got worse from there. So misophonia is a learned condition. Okay, any questions popping up? Yes, go ahead, Harriet. Unmute yourself.
Okay. Only put this out real quick if I can. It has to do with comorbidity. My daughter was diagnosed with Tourette's at 8, which is a typical age of onset, just twitching and blinking and all that. Fortunately diagnosed very early, considering it was the early 80s. And since, of course, I was very worried she'd get coprolalia, which some people have. It's involuntary cursing. And so I just let her make a lot of noise and jump on beds all night and, get it out. I'm method acting, get it out. Don't repress it. Like if somebody punishes you, it gets worse. They start getting, this was the thing that supposedly boys had, but girls didn't. But it really, if you ever look at Love on the Spectrum, which is a thing it's on Netflix. I think it's from Australia. It's pairing kind of young adult autistic people together who are high functioning. The reality seemed to be that females are very articulate, some of them more so. I mean, they're overly articulate. You know what I'm saying? They're finding all kinds of interesting details and everything and verbalizing them, unlike most of the males. My daughter also gets, I would say, misophonia other than certain triggers by if she just thinks you're starting to say something and she already knows what you're saying. So you think, I'm like, is this really corporalalia? Not just uttering an obscenity, but getting all these long strings of words out like a triumphant way. Anyway, I just leave it at that. I
Well,
hope that didn't trigger anybody, but do you know what I mean?
well, I do, but there, Harriet, I think that that's a very specific comorbidity,
Yeah.
and there are many comorbidities. In fact, there's probably every possible comorbidity of people with
no question.
misophonia. So that doesn't tie strongly to misophonia. It's not common. What you're describing is not common in terms of the couple of thousand people that I've talked to with misophonia.
Okay,
So,
I appreciate that you have this seminar because I can accept she has misophonia, and as I do, as my father does, and not try to change it because it's a rather finite, interesting thing. Whereas looking at this from all those other comorbidity things, that we were constantly running to neurologists, and you know what I mean. Whereas it's easy to look at it as just a thing that goes off in the ear and just
yeah.
So I appreciate that.
For the other comorbidity things, see a good psychologist, or neurologist or something. So you can.
When you've been listening to kids and say 3 out talking and out, it's just sort of taking a funny adversarial position verbally, and thinking you're going to straighten them out when you're not. It's easier for me to look at it as a kind of misophonia. It's she's trying to shut the other person up.
Okay. Yeah.
Not so much being domineering, but just that's bothering me. What you're saying, that's
Right.
I'm the same way. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Lau.
Right. To kind of elaborate on what I'm sorry, what was your name? The young lady.
Harriet.
Harriet. Yeah. My brother and father had transient hyperacusis. And I guess that's the same area of the brain that is kind of wired wrong, that's causing misophonia. I mean, that's my from what my reading I've done about it is my assumption. I'm just wondering if that kind of the same area of the brain that's kind of malfunctioning, because I guess it's a kind of a hereditary thing. Does that make any sense, or am I making that?
Well, I'd rather not go there, Lyle, because I'm not an expert on these other areas, and it would be speculation from my part. As a behaviorist and behavioral parenting coach, we see some behaviors that's driven by interaction. That's just a child starts to do something. I met with a mom of a 5-year-old, and at the end of the session we had, she was so happy. She said, "I thought my daughter hated me. She's doing all of these ugly things. She's doing all these inappropriate things, but it generates mommy interaction." And so mommy interaction or parent interaction is one of the most rewarding things a child can get. So there are things at play here that just don't make sense, but from a behavioral science, you say, "Oh, I see that, the 3-year-old dropped the baby and broke their leg because when the baby cried, his favorite person came into the room, mommy." And so he just, it just accelerated. But let's get back on the misophonia area.
I just want to say thank you.
You're welcome, Harry. Glad to have you here.
Various manifestations that are much more mommy loving than I would have ever dreamed. Thank you.
So there is, I'm just going to share a little bit of my understanding of misophonia here, that when you read about misophonia on the internet, it's generally talked about as this kind of poorly understood neurological, psychological condition where people hear these common sounds and they have these really strong emotions. Now, some people don't have any violent or aggressive responses. Some people, don't feel the fear at all, but these are very common. But even in that universal, as you said, Lyle, sounds from the dinner table, about 4% of the people with misophonia do not have dinner table sounds as triggers. So it's not universal. What our research indicates is that people hear a trigger and there is a physical reflex in the body. This is a learned physical reflex, and that physical reflex then triggers the emotions and the distress. Now, this reflex happens, we've measured it and we've published an article with it, that from the time, by hooking up electrodes to a person, from the time an auditory trigger starts until this physical reflex hits is about 200 milliseconds. So if you're watching it, you don't even notice the delay. It appears instantaneous. And then we don't have any data on when these intense negative emotions happen, but it's almost instant as well. And these emotions overwhelm the person. Now I'm going to have to shift to a little bit different view here for a moment, because I've got a little hidden piece here. This is what most people with misophonia experience, that they hear the sound and they feel rage. It feels instant. But when I work with people at the up close and personal and try to do a test for their misophonia initial reflex with a tiny microscopic trigger, then they recognize something, right? They recognize this physical reflex. And if you want to try this, there is a free app that's called the Misophonia Reflex Finder app. And it is this purple head app here. And it allows you to play a trigger. There's some built in, you can also recording, but it allows you to set the volume and the duration so that what you're hearing is just a little, that didn't come through because my original sound's not on, a little type of a sound that's the start of something. And if the person knows it's the start of a specific trigger, then that will often start to trigger them. One of my favorite answers, I play it, and I say, did you hear that? Yes. Did it trigger you? And I'll hear somebody say, well, not really, which means that they felt something, but it wasn't a normal misophonia experience. And when they're having that very small sensation, it tells them where in the body that's starting. And so by going ahead and identifying that, then it makes it where you can do certain things when you're in a misophonia situation. If your reflex is in your shoulders, it's good to relax all over, but it's more important to relax your shoulders. I worked with a person whose reflex was in their jaw, and relaxing the jaw is something that we can all do. We have the neurological connections to do that. And when she relaxed her jaw, her misophonia immediately in that moment started to go down a little bit. So if you could just stop this reflex of misophonia, and it breaks the chain, and so then you're basically done, right? Because it's that reflex that's kicking off the emotions. But you can't, because this is normal neurology. Now, I bet some of you with misophonia feel that there's something wrong with your brain. And there's no chemical imbalance or neurons shorting out, or it's been proposed there's this defect in your upper brain telling you that these sounds are going to hurt you. It's really normal human neurology. It's called Pavlovian conditioning. So we know how to bring down this reflex, and as the reflex comes down, the emotions, the distress, the needing to run out of the room, all of these things come down. Now, this doesn't work for everyone, but it works for a lot of people. And so this is the treatment of misophonia that I developed, and this fall, we're going to be having an official university misophonia study on this method of treatment by incorporating and understanding the initial physical reflexes. I've actually drunk from this container with the straw, and it rarely triggered, but I have one person out of all the people I've ever met with that triggers. So if you see me pick this up to wet my whistle, close your eyes if that triggers you. So it was interesting. Nate Mitchell, a psychologist and the secretary of the Misophonia Institute, he called me in 2018. He had been to he's an OCD expert and a misophonia expert now. And he had been to this training session where they were talking about exposure and response prevention for misophonia, which is like the gold standard. Sorry, I said that wrong. For OCD, exposure and response prevention is the gold standard for OCD. And he was told, hey, you treat misophonia like OCD, use it's called ERP, use ERP. And he had a couple of misophonia patients who were, well, they were OCD patients, but they were also had misophonia, and they were very committed. And so he just said, well, let's do this, you know? And they were really motivated to do this. And he said he could see them jumping and moving, and, you know, it just didn't work. And so he called me, and I explained this model of misophonia to him. And he went off and started applying his knowledge as a psychologist and having good success with it. And so we were doing a booth at the we had one at the American Psychological Association convention, and then we did another at the American Psychiatric Association convention, and we were, you know, trying to promote this is under a knowledge of misophonia awareness, and we were giving out these little angry balls, right? So it has a definition of misophonia on the back and a little angry ball, and it was fun to give these out, and it, you know, it's a little unique. So we were able to get the word out, and toward the end of the convention, we were just chatting, and it was in August, and he was going to be going back to be a professor. He said, yeah, I'm going to have to drop my clinical load because, you know, I haven't been a professor for the summer, so I've got it built up. And I said, well, I guess you're not taking any new misophonia patients. He says, oh, I am, because they're easy. And I said, they're easy? You know, that was his view. He said, compared to OCD, misophonia patients are easy. And so I learned more from him as to how he was doing this work. And it's not that it's 100%, but yeah, Elmar, we'll get you a second. And so I was just really surprised that he thought that misophonia was easy, because I thought it was very difficult. So Elmar.
I want to comment. Do you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, I want to comment on this EBR. It's the worst thing you can do with one with misophonia. It's pure torture, and it
Yes.
gets only worse. So
Yes.
someone has to tell the psychologist that's the worst thing you can do with one with misophonia. It's horrible.
It's horrible. You're right. Now, are you a misophonia sufferer or a misophonia treatment provider?
I am a sufferer, and I suffer from OCD and a lot of things. Now, I have been your patient, so that's another interesting thing. I have heard about your theory. One thing I wanted to mention is you wrote an email, probably to all of us, about that it's getting boring. You say, if you get bored about a trigger sound, that it will go away. It won't work with me. It's another very dangerous thing. The first thing, this is kind of disgust. So I never have heard that you can get bored about it disgust. If something is disgusting, it's always disgusting.
Okay, so let me clarify this, what I had said, okay? So first off, there's two primary reflexes that are very different in misophonia, okay? Actually, I hate to call them primary. There's two reflexes that we address. One is just remembering a misophonia situation. Stuck in a car with triggers, dinner table with, and I have people close their eyes, and if everybody here with misophonia wants to try this, just close your eyes, relax, and then think of a misophonia situation, not a specific sound. Don't want you to trigger yourself. Just remember that meal or that car ride or whatever it was. And if you feel something, and about half of the people that I work with go, yeah, I'm feeling my body tightening up. And I say, how strong is it? And they go, well, it's like on a 0 to 10 scale, it's like a 5, or it's like 2, or one person, it's like 7. And if you're having that kind of a response to just remembering being triggered, it's kind of like a PTSD response. It doesn't give you necessarily the disgust and the anger and everything, but it's disconcerting. And that is what Nate Mitchell taught me to work on, to counter conditioning that. And so and the way you get rid of that kind of memory reflex is you have a very positive, high endorphin level of activity. One woman that I worked with had a little baby, so she was playing with her 6-month-old. And then she would periodically just go, car ride, and then back to the baby, right? So she gets a little sample of that memory with the very positive activity going on, and that little negative memory starts to die out, okay? And that's what we want to become boring, Elmer, right? Not the misophonia trigger. That is
I can tell you what happened.
Yes.
I can tell you what happened. What it's still, for me, in my experience, it's very dangerous.
Okay, please, Elmar,
please
talk.
If you tell me about misophonia triggers, yeah.
No, please talk slowly.
Can you hear me?
Your internet is breaking up a bit.
Okay.
So go ahead.
Sorry. So for me, everything if I combine a trigger sound with something else, it's always dangerous. It's very fast. Even if I imagine a trigger sound and I hear something which is disturbing me, the other thing becomes another trigger. It's very fast. So these experiments for me, even these experiments are for me dangerous because I can pick up other trigger sounds just by imagine. If I imagine some trigger sound, I feel very unwell. I feel fear. I want to escape. And then there's some noise which I can't escape. It becomes a trigger sound. I have picked up so many trigger sounds. I spent most of my life below headphones. So it's another dangerous thing. Now I have heard.
Elmar, it is for you, but for most people with misophonia, it is not. What I'm describing is not a dangerous thing, because I have people do it very mildly. If a person has a very strong memory, that, like you're talking about, this very, very strong memory, rather than trying to think of a vivid past memory, it may just be car rides, as opposed to specific car rides or specific people, and it doesn't work for everyone. I had one person who, the problem is you want to have, it's got to be mild enough. It has to be mild enough, and if you can't get it mild enough, you can't do it. So it sounds like for you can't get a mild, soft memory. I tell the people that some people, when they think of car rides with dad, it's like the trigger grabs them around the neck and pulls them away, and they can't come back. So what I'm talking about with people is to try to make sure that they can think of a past situation and then let it go in 5 seconds or more, or less. Just like, and then go right back into playing with the baby, okay? And for people who can do that, that can create a counter-conditioning event where the memory starts to decay and becomes more boring. Okay, that's what I'm talking about with the boring. Now, misophonia triggers are different. So with misophonia triggers, the way to do counter conditioning that brings down that physical reflex is to have a very small trigger. So much so you want to trigger that you can relax. You may be adding noise to the world, noise to your ears so that it's small, and you relax, you breathe, you focus on other things, and you carry on. And in that situation, the brain can start to let go of that physical zap that you're getting. This one person that was mentioning had a jaw reflex, and when she was in a situation, a surprise trigger happened, but she was pulling weeds from an elderly neighbor's flower garden, and she wanted to be doing that. And so she tried to relax. She relaxed her jaw, and she could feel her distress level came down. And when you get that situation that your distress level is coming down, and so she was physically and visually focusing, grabbing, pulling, working on the weeds. She was relaxing her body, especially her jaw, because that was where her reflex was. And she was carrying on. And she experienced a decay in her misophonia in that setting. And this person went from like maxed out on her misophonia. She had quit her job at age 43, moved into a bedroom in her parents' basement, and for 2 years was like 90% or more isolated, either with headphones and noise or just physically isolating herself. And her misophonia overall severity decayed very much. I published this article. Now, this doesn't happen to everyone, okay? So I'm not saying this will work for everyone, but because of her particular reflex was one that could work with, let me share this with everyone. This is out of a journal article that I published. I think it was published in 97, if I remember. But this was her misophonia severity, and she didn't have any significant comorbid OCD or even, especially worse, is some kind of an OCD that's not a ritual, but is a thought, like germs or some kind of thing that has a person intrusive thoughts. So she was able to do this, and her severity came down. But this doesn't work for everyone, Elmore. You sound to be very distressed misophonia with almost any trigger. And this has to be a case where the person can relax and carry on and change that physical reflex. So, so anyway, but you can also, for having misophonia, at some point, as people start to, and I think this happens to a lot of people who are getting better from their misophonia, is it stops overwhelming them so much so that they can carry on in what they're doing. And at that point, if the triggers are mild, the brain will start to let go of it. But that's, go ahead.
If you work with patients, you have to be careful, because for me, there's no mild trigger. It doesn't exist. Every trigger, right. I can hurt a little bit, I can hurt a lot of it. It's inside is the 200 microseconds is a reaction. I measured some reaction with my hands. It's a normal time lapse when a reaction sets in. It's immediate. Yeah,
What's
if
define immediate?
I measured my time when I press a button. I see a sign. I see some stimulus, some stimulus, and I press a button. When I measured this time, 200 milliseconds.
Yes.
That's I mean, it's immediate. That's why I mean
Right.
immediate. There's another thing, but that's okay. I see that you have different patients and it works with them. So just take it with caution. Some people might make it worse. So if you expose them to such kind of experiments, like if you would do it with me, it would only get worse. That's my observation. Then there's a thing with, you told me when I was in therapy years ago, you told me about this muscle reflex. Now I have a very special muscle, it's this one. So if I get very much triggered, I didn't know it after, but I observed myself after your treatment. So if I get very much triggered, it makes like this. Curiously, I detected this muscle in a completely different situation. I was very happy. I was going to Iceland. I had a very pleasant, very exciting, happy feeling, and my mouth went like this, and I said, "That's strange." Now I exposed myself to Then I was in the mountains, a similar situation, a nice place. I had a nice day, but I heard a dog barking, which triggers me. And the muscle, after that first event, the muscle went again. And then I knew, aha, that's the one you were talking about.
Yes.
Now, since you say that it's a conditioning, I try to counter condition this muscle, since I noticed it's in both in nice situation and bad situations. I said, okay, if it's a nice situation, I would like to get used that the muscle only starts reacting in nice situations. So I purposely reacted with this muscle in nice situation to counter conditions this misophonia. I don't know if it helped. My misophonia dropped, but it could have many reasons why it dropped. So I've been in therapy. I'm taking medications now and all things. So it's no proof. But my idea was to counter condition is to associate this feeling with this muscle something nice, because that's where I noticed it first. So what do you think about this idea, the counter condition, something which is horrible with something nice? It's the same reaction. The muscle goes, the lip goes.
Yes, I don't know, Elmar. I really don't know, because you're dealing with a Pavlovian physical reflex, okay? And my understanding, first off, there is a vast shortage. There's very poor research on Pavlovian conditioning, because we went from Ivan Pavlov with the dogs and the bell and such, to we went to how does people's thinking change this, and so and then measuring secondary responses. So there's very little research on, for example, if you're a surgeon, in the olden days you'd get a pager, and when the hospital needed you, the pager would go off and you'd call in and go to the hospital. Now, a lot of surgeons develop reflexes to their pagers, because the pager would go off, burp, they have a thought, oh no, what's horrible thing has happened? Like I'm demonstrating a muscle reflex. And the brain stem, I call it the lizard brain, the autonomic nervous system, doesn't see the thoughts. It notices the pager, it notices the shoulders. It notices the pager, it notices the shoulders. For 2 seconds it's watching, and then it's pager, zap. And so I don't know that you can, if it worked for you, did the happy thoughts and this work for you for your misophonia, Elmar?
I got better, but it could be as many reasons. I cannot prove it.
Okay.
Yeah, so many things I did after knowing, but it helped already to know that I have misophonia and I could do something against it. So it was worse when I had this condition. I didn't know what is happening to me. Now, when I started to understand I have misophonia, I contacted you. We had some sessions. Then I
Yes.
learned it from you, what I could do. Oh,
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm going to show this.
and okay. And so from there, I improved. But it could be many factors, and I don't know which factor was dominant. But I learned from you it's a condition, and I had this idea that if it is a condition, even Pavlovian reflex, you can counter condition. So I
Yes.
invented myself something trying to counter condition this Pavlovian reflex. When I had decades misophonia, and I was never aware of this muscle. It
Yes.
was trigger reflex,
So
and it still happens like this.
So this is where oops, I'm having trouble getting it to straighten out here. Wrong grab. My I'm trying to, my computer is responding slowly for some reason. Basically, you okay, so let's see if I can, no. Anyway, it won't do it. I was just going to say that physical reflex, you were like most people with misophonia, you never recognize that reflex, right? Because it happens so fast.
Yeah.
What I was going to say about counter conditioning is it appears that the brainstem is watching for 2 seconds after a trigger. Okay, so there's two things. One is the emotional reflex. I was trying to show the emotional reflex. And the emotional reflex, I believe, is triggered by the internal physical sensation. When you do that, it's like you're getting jabbed physically from your brainstem.
Yeah.
And so it takes that jab and the sound, and it says, oh, that's rage, and then you have the emotional reaction. If you're associating I can even do that you do, that what you can do with your mouth, that if that feeling is being associated with positive emotions, that's a learned emotional response. Okay, that there are both learned emotional responses and learned physical responses of misophonia, and it's the emotions that are the most noticeable. So if you pair that feeling of the lips with a positive emotion, then you may have been working on the emotional reflex of misophonia.
That's what I was trying.
Right, but not the physical reflex, not to stop your lips from doing that motion, but it stopped. It attacked. Yeah. It addressed the emotional reflex.
Yeah.
And I've never even considered doing that, but I know that the people who do the secret repatterning hypnotherapy, Chris Pearson and people he's trained, they work on reducing the emotional reflex of misophonia. So yes, I can see how that could work. What I wanted to point out is that for the physical reflex, your brain is just watching what you do. It hears the sound, it hits the muscles, and then it says, did I predict correctly? And if you tighten those muscles, it goes, correct prediction, I'm going to keep doing it. If it's a bad trigger and it's trigger, boom, and you go, ah, then it says, next time I will hit the muscle harder, and the reflex strengthen with normal experience. That's why ERP is so bad, is because it's a normal trigger, and you get the trigger, reflex, trigger, reflex, trigger, reflex, trigger, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. So, but if it's a muscle that you can relax, then if it's trigger, relax, then the brain stem starts to back down, trigger, relax, trigger, relax, trigger, relax, and it can go down. Okay, so the brain is watching for the change in the muscle. Okay, it's watching. So in some, for some of my patients, they have had an urge to urinate, a pelvic floor pee response. And let's just say a pelvic floor muscle response. And so with them, I've had them tighten that muscle, and then here again a very tiny bit of trigger. So it's muscles tighten, trigger, the brain goes and then they relax. Then they tighten it up again, trigger, relax. Tighten it up again, trigger, relax. And that has worked with some people who had a pelvic floor response, because it's very hard to relax your pelvic floor and keep it relaxed. So my thought, Elmar, is that if you can make that sound, that shape with your lips, and hear a very small, again, it has to be very small trigger, not to explode your mind, and then relax those muscles, right? You're tensing the muscles, and then a little bit of a trigger and relax. And so what the lizard brain sees is, I heard that muscle, I'm supposed to tense, I heard the trigger, I'm supposed to tense this one, but instead of tensing it, I saw it relax. So it's just a possibility.
Yeah, I got the idea. I will try it. So when I hear, I'm not exposing myself, but when I hear a trigger sound, I try to relax the muscles. Yes, the last comment is my daughter has misophonia, and this muscle, this movement of this muscle triggers her, and I was not aware about it. But this muscle, there's a lot of things. If I'm under stress, for example, so it has nothing to do with misophonia. Just stress, preoccupation, fear, the muscle starts to move. So it's not only misophonia, it's a lot of negative emotion, and the muscle moves.
And that makes sense as to how your misophonia developed with that muscle, because you had a tense situation with a sound, and your natural reaction was to tighten that muscle. Another person, their natural reaction is to clench their fist because they're angry or whatever. Sorry. So it makes sense that was a natural reaction of yours, because that's how it became the misophonia muscle reaction.
And when I'm, the best example is if I'm worried about something, she notices it because the muscle moves. So it's just worry. What has it to do with misophonia? Worries, and where is misophonia and this muscle? There must be some relation between it.
Yeah. Well, I believe it has to do with the way it started. Let me ask a quick question. Elmar, how old is your daughter?
She's now 19.
19?
Yeah.
19. Okay. When she's with you, it would be best if she doesn't watch you. Because if she watches you, then she's gonna, it puts the focus on it. So
I tell her to tell me, and then I'm aware of it, and then I can stop it.
Okay.
But the thing is, I'm not aware of it, and it goes on and on without noticing it. Okay. So that's what I'm interested in, is this relation. So how strong is this? So that muscle starts moving whenever I have intense feelings.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is, so if the solution is to relax this muscle, I would have to relax it always if I have an intense emotion. That would be a solution, maybe.
Okay. It's challenge. Let's get Harriet, and then we'll get Jolene. Harriet, go ahead. You have to unmute, Harriet.
I hear you all talking about instant, you practically retroactive, reactions. Mine are delayed. They are like, if it's a speaker or a minister or anyone who has taken it upon themselves to conduct a meeting, and they speak in a cadence that's monotonous. Do you know what I mean? But I can't figure that out immediately. I mean, it's not like it takes long, but I'm already in the pool, you know what I mean, with that person, and I can run for the door, or I plug up my ears and hum to myself. And it's, this is not making me a lot of friends. And I am living in the middle of wilderness. I could scream my head off and no one could hear for a mile. I mean, it's one thing to put yourself in a place where you're not being triggered all the time, but we still need to interact with other humans, right?
Yeah. It's a challenge. It is.
I mean, would that work with the Reflex Finder app? Would I put in?
Well, the question is the question about the Reflex Finder app is to determine what your reflex is. And if you're, even though you don't notice it when it normally happens, as Elmar did, once he started noticing it, he noticed it, right? So, but if it's your curling your toes under, you want to relax your feet. If it's you're tensing your shoulders up, you want to
Holding
relax.
my breath. I just stopped breathing.
Oh,
breathing.
okay. Wait, you just stopped breathing. So
Yeah.
let
Because
me.
I know I want to say something like,
Okay.
or scream. Scream would be
Okay.
something I like
So
to do.
Harriet, the stop breathing is a common initial physical reflex. So you recognize the stimulus, you recognize the trigger, and your brainstem, your lizard brain goes, and you stop breathing. Okay. The solution that this is different for hands or jaw or shoulders. You want to relax those muscles, but for breathing, you want to use them. You want to use the muscles. Okay. So what you want to do is willfully breathe in, and then breathe out, and then breathe in and breathe out. Now, I call it scuba breathing because in scuba diving, the rule in scuba diving is that you always breathe, you never hold your breath.
I found that to be true. Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you can also breathe out by humming. When you're humming, you're breathing out. When you're singing, you're breathing out. And if you will just let the air go out slowly, and then I've got my audio on, so you'll hear this little. You hear that sound, the air coming out, and you can close your mouth. I can do it with my mouth closed, but I can breathe out for like 30 seconds. And so when you're doing that, and you see a trigger, it starts to change your lizard brain. So slow, steady breathing for that trigger is what you need to do, and you need to be doing the breathing before and through the trigger. Okay, smaller triggers.
If the person is speaking for 10 minutes or 20 minutes, I will start listening to my own breath just to be listening to something different. Yeah.
But if you're continually breathing, that will start, if it is a breath reflex, that will slowly reduce your misophonia severity for that trigger.
But I'm not being able to titrate the trigger at all.
Then you need to use AirPods or make a recording of him or something, where you can make sure you're breathing. When you're there and he's talking, you should be doing the slow, steady breathing all the time. Okay. Jolene, you had something. You've had your hand up the longest. What's up?
Yeah, I wanted to go back to, this is a different subject. It's something you said a few minutes ago about pelvic floor and the urge to urinate. I have on occasion worked with people who have a reaction, but they wouldn't have called it, well, I don't know how they would have characterized it exactly, but it's referred to more as a genital reflex. It's like almost a sexual feeling.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if that's the same thing you're talking about when you're referring to this, urinary reaction, pelvic floor thing.
No, it's not the same, because in that person, it wasn't a disgusting sexual response. That particular person was not a sexual response, but I've seen that sexual response in other people. Let me show this summary slide I made for this study we did in 2015, got it published in 2017. And these arrows indicate locations where people felt something physically when they heard a tiny, tiny trigger. And this isn't the same thing as having big triggers and becoming, distressed and having a sexual response. This is the first ping, and 2 out of the 26 people had sexual responses. One described it as a pulse of her vagina, and the other described it as a clitoral response. And I've had some men who feel it in their penis. So how these develop, I don't know, but they just accidentally develop. And so, yes, it's very real, and it's the hardest thing for me to help people deal with. Okay.
Okay,
So,
thanks for
sure.
clarifying.
Okay, I will, Harriet. Is there? Oh, Lyle. Harriet sent a comment to you, but go ahead, Lyle. If you want to say something, go ahead, and then you can look at Harriet's comment.
Yeah, real quickly, I have the muscular response that I believe that I have as a sufferer is the tensor tympani in my ear, and I've always described it since I was a little kid as having a pain in my ear, and I think that what's going on is the tensor tympani is flexing and it's painful.
Yeah.
That's not a muscle that you have any kind of control over. How do you relax that situation? I mean, and
So the Pavel Yastrobov, who named misophonia, said that he believed that was a secondary response, that because your brain has taken these sounds to be so horrible, it's like an air horn in your ear, and that causes that tensor tympani muscle to pull. I don't know. The answer is I don't know, Lyle. But what he said is that when the misophonia goes down, then the tensor tympani response goes down. So work on the reducing the misophonia response. But if you don't, I don't know on that. Okay, we have another hand. We have another hand up here. I can't pronounce your name. Wanko. Oh, yes. Go ahead. Unmute, please. And there you go. So what is your question?
I have like a series of questions. My first question is on the topic on, I don't know if I pronounce it properly, but this misokinesia that has to do with the visuals.
Yes, we would typically just call those visual triggers. It's the same
Okay.
neurological problem. So my preference is just call it auditory triggers, visual triggers. It's a visual trigger.
Okay, so they are connected. And my second question is actually on these coping mechanisms. Like you already talked about the reflex and actually finding the reflex. But the thing is that I've not actually ever gotten any medical, like, official medical diagnosis on misophonia. Well, I just took like online tests and browsed about it to just know what's going on. But the major problem I have right now is that the environment I'm in actually is an environment that just sees your condition as something that's linked to your personality, just sees you as an irritable person. And especially when your family don't actually really understand those triggers and everything. And like it's like everywhere. I'm in school currently. So it's like every environment, whether I'm just in my lodge, there's a dog barking, there are cars, like I think there's a place where they repair cars around my house, and there are cars honking. Like there's so many triggers around me, and it's very, very difficult. So when you talked about reflexes, I've actually didn't know about these reflexes before. According to what I understood by what you talked about, reflexes are those physical reactions you get when you hear these triggers, right?
Right.
So for me, when I hear these triggers, I think I usually clench or stretch out my fingers, or there's this kind of expression. I wrinkle my forehead and I just stop breathing, like she said. So, but sometimes, like when I'm at home and let's say the main trigger at that moment is my mom's chewing, and And so I'm trying not to make her feel bad because she actually does not understand what I'm going through at the moment. So I'm trying to focus on myself at that moment, like trying to release the tension on my forehead and trying to like release the tension in my fingers or trying to breathe at that moment. I think that's a way of addressing these reflexes, right?
That's correct. Relax.
But it doesn't work
Relax.
for me.
What?
It doesn't work for me. Most times I'm still very, very anxious. And even when I've left the environment, it's still very difficult for me to like regain myself after that trigger. I feel this, I don't know how to describe it, this kind of anger, guilt, fear, anxiety, like just a rush of emotions, this desire to just escape at that moment. And it's continuous because if it's not at home, it's in school. And it's worse when I'm in like a crowd of people. Even when I use headphones, you know, there are some sounds that still escape too, because I just use regular headphones. So there are still some sounds that I can still hear despite using those headphones. So I don't know if there are any other coping mechanisms or strategies that I can actually use.
Okay, so a couple of things. Let me suggest first that when your misophonia is it's a horrible experience, right? It's a terrible feeling that you have after you're triggered. I don't know what you feel because I've never been triggered, but I know, talked to enough people, I know it's horrible. Now, so when you're having strong triggers, it's very hard to relax and focus your attention. They overwhelm you. So coping mechanisms with headphones, ambient noise, a noise app on your phone can be very beneficial. Here's a great noise app. This one by White Noise by TM Soft, the pink or the blue, and you can have sounds that have similar frequencies, and that can do a better job with variation in them. And that can do a better job of blocking triggers than music. So there are some other techniques, there's sharing techniques that people will talk about in some of the Facebook groups about trying to relax your body, focus your attention on other things, use the noise in your ears, but there's not a simple solution as to how to recover from an overwhelming trigger. So I say experiment with yourself and see what works. This is something that I had one person who had bad triggers, and when she was triggered, she had a prolonged fear response. And I told her that you can improve your mood with a pencil, okay? And then you smile, and the smile needs to be so big that you don't, just really huge, big. Now, big smile there, Harriet, all right? Yeah. And when you do that for 20 seconds, your brain stem release dopamine and serotonin, and it's actually taking a pill. You're actually taking a dose of endorphins and feel-good chemicals in your brain when you smile like that for 20 seconds. And for her, it broke that ugly, prolonged after misophonia response. For other people's, it doesn't. I mean, there's no one thing that's going to help everybody. Okay, I've got a hand up for Elmar. And you look great, Harriet. You look great there with the pencil. Okay, Elmar.
I just have to say that, but doing that, it also gives people kind of a little idea that you're feeling something, right?
Yeah, thank you.
Pretty cool.
Okay, Elmar, you have your
Hi.
hand up.
I'm actually Elmar's daughter.
Okay.
I have a question. Well, I have two questions. One is, how much would you agree with like psychiatrists who say that misophonia is like not something specifically like disorder in itself, but it's like some kind of secondary effect from anxiety or OCD?
Okay, let me respond to that first question, okay?
Okay.
I absolutely feel sure that misophonia is a unique single condition that people with other conditions of anxiety and OCD and depression and all kinds of other things have comorbidity and that they kind of intertwine. But with misophonia, it's like, here's my big rubber band, okay? It's like you hear that sound and it hits you. It hits you in a unique way, and I believe that misophonia is a unique, singular condition of a learned physical and emotional response to certain stimuli. Okay, so that's the answer to the first question. What's the second question or more?
The second question is, I didn't have actually like misophonia. It was like for me, I don't know. I observed that my sister and my dad, they had both misophonia, but I was kind of glad that I didn't have to suffer like them. But some months ago, or maybe years, maybe 1 year, I don't know, I started like experiencing what they describe in myself. And yeah, because actually the same thing as them, when my mom like chews or eats, her eating sounds, I can't stand them. Whenever I hear them, I kind of get an immediate feeling like I wanna scream and shout and like break my chest open and get my heart out and smash it so I don't.
Okay, so let me address that. Misophonia, okay, misophonia is contagious. I'm sorry, you're breaking up. You're breaking up right now. So let me
Don't have it. And my question is,
okay, we're losing you on the question. If you can type that question in the chat box, but let me give a response about catching misophonia. Misophonia is contagious. And the reason it is contagious is because your father and your sister would hear these sounds and they would become distressed. Now, if you are around them, they're going to, if they comment about it, that's going to be distressful to you. If you know it bothers them, then you hear the sound and you think, oh no, my sister's going to be upset. Like, wow, I hope she didn't hear it. And you're going to have reactions because you know that people you love are going to be distressed and have reactions. So it's very easy to develop misophonia when someone around you has misophonia because you know and care about them and you know that these sounds are distressing to them and therefore you have a reaction. And once there's a sound and a reaction, then it becomes a misophonia trigger for you. Okay? So thank you for asking that. If you have okay, I have another question, and again, I can pronounce your last name, Barry Pearly Wanko. Go ahead and ask your question. We're about out of time.
Okay, thank you. My question is, you talked about the reflexes when it comes to coping mechanisms, but sometimes it actually gets so bad for me because there is this physical reaction. I mean, I have like really, really bad headaches. Like, I wanted to ask if there are like a specific medical treatment or just a prolonged way of trying to cope with this distress, because sometimes I have really bad headaches or I just can't breathe properly for a long period of time, for like 2 days, 3 days. I'm struggling to breathe properly, and sometimes I become very depressed, like very, very depressed, like so serious. I'm anxious all throughout that time, and I feel like at this point, just focusing on my reflexes, trying to relax those reflexes in those parts of my body might not really be enough to actually reduce these headaches and this depression that I just feel at that moment. So sometimes it's actually quite serious for me.
Yes, I understand you have, I mean, very serious suffering because of misophonia. I don't have a good solution. You need to experiment and try to see what works for you, find calming mechanisms, um, seek help from other support groups, misophonia treatment and management. If you want to go onto that Facebook group and join it and just post the question, I have a very hard time recovering from severe misophonia triggers. What works for you? And let people share what works for them, because everybody is different in trying to recover from misophonia triggers, in the secondary responses and how long it takes them to recover. We developed a severity measure for misophonia, and one of the questions was, after you're triggered, how long does it take you to recover? And the highest rating on that was more than 24 hours. So you're not alone. You're not the only person who has these very, very long reactions to recover from misophonia triggers, but it's very, very difficult. Okay, so we're going to wrap it up here. One last thing, Harriet, Jolene, and then, yes, Harriet.
I guess if it's a noise made by another person, and you react for more than a day, for 2 days, 3 days, I should have done this, I should have left, I should have lied and made an excuse and whatever. I mean, is there anything that you can think of to control your anger toward the person, which is obviously unfair, but I mean, it can be really like a deep grudge. You
Yeah,
know, like I've been hurt by them. Yeah.
I know, and I don't have. I'm a behaviorist. I deal mostly with behavioral things, and that's not my specialty, and so I'd rather not comment. Jolene, you get the last
Yeah.
words.
Well, so that's where somebody else may be. I mean, I think what Tom does, what you do, Tom, is valuable for a lot of different people for specific triggers, and for people such as Harriet and the person whose name neither one of us would be able to pronounce correctly. Probably something else would be more useful, or would be, to add to that, which would be working with a psychotherapist who works with a broader range of things that are connected, the anxiety and the OCD and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So
So let me give an example here. So here's something from a psychotherapist who talks about misophonia like an onion, where you have the core reaction in the middle, and then onto that you add the irritation and your judgment and your emotional reactions, and you can work on trying to peel the onion back by working on the different layers that are there. Jillian, do you recognize this photo? Of course.
she wins. You have my book. That is my book.
So that's her book. That's her book for therapists. So yes, there are good problems there. There are good psychotherapists is much better at working on those prolonged kind of things. So
Yeah.
All right,
that's what I would say.
everyone, thank
Gotta
you.
go.
Thank you very much for appearing, for being here today. I'm looking for my, well, I guess I just lost my page that I thought I had that showed what we were doing here today. Oh, there we are. So there, I'm going to share my last screen here, right? So go to misophonia.org for more information from Misophonia Institute. It's actually, that goes to misophoniainstitute.org. But anyway, thank you for being here today, and it's been a pleasure. And I plan on doing this next Saturday, and let's see if we can have a good chat with this and can have some benefit for people. So thank you very much, everyone. Bye-bye.